been very lucky to coach a large number of athletes from all different backgrounds. Our triathlon club has actually won the national championship in triathlon, and one of my top athletes won the world championship in triathlon as well. So we've had some good success, and metabolic testing has played a little piece in that. I've also been doing endurance sports myself for over 20 years now, so I've done over 150 triathlons, Ironman events, marathons, the whole gamut, and qualified at least on the age group side for Team USA, and have been competing in several world championships over the past several years. I'm also an ambassador for a lot of sports, a lot of the governing bodies and different groups that I work with. I've held certifications in all different backgrounds in regards to endurance sports and also metabolic efficiency training. The testing background, though, I've estimated, and I've kind of lost track over the years, but I've done probably about over 1,000, might even be approaching 2,000 metabolic tests over the last 10 years now, between RMR, VO2, blood lactate, metabolic efficiency, so on and so forth. So I've made a little bit of a career out of it, and I've also been lucky enough to kind of work with different groups and get featured in different ways. So whether it's magazine write-ups, I've had a couple TV appearances even, so not a celebrity by any means, but I love having fun with endurance sports and metabolic testing, and so sharing that knowledge is something that I just love to do. So a little bit about my background. So the company I now I created, is called 4-Star Endurance, and this is really based around the 4-star theme of the Chicago flag, if you're familiar with Chicago. And I break down to the 4 main motivators that I've worked with our athletes on in different ways. So one of them is around developing training plans, one of them is around metabolic testing, one of them is around education, and then also fun and inspiring things, which ties into different events. So USA Triathlon actually recognized us with an entrepreneurship award earlier last year in regards to using indoor triathlons and technology and kind of blending a lot of science and technology into endurance sports. So if you hear me talk about 4-Star Endurance, that's my company. But my background with especially the KORR metabolic carts has actually come from a company before that. I was working at fitness formula clubs, which, if you're familiar with the Lifetime Fitness gyms, essentially a Lifetime Fitness type of health club in Chicago. And we just got our first metabolic cart when we started our triathlon center, and actually grew that over the years into 7 metabolic carts at several different locations, and developed a whole endurance and testing business around it, generating over about $1 million in revenue over the years. Now I'm doing 4-Star Endurance, which is my own company, which I've kind of evolved so that I'm not necessarily tied to one location, but partnering with different facilities, different partners, and even doing at-home testing. So it's kind of opened the door to several new things. And one of my challenges when I first started looking into making my own company is, if I'm doing metabolic testing, I wanted to see how quickly I could get to profitability getting a new metabolic cart. So I ended up getting the Cardio Coach Pro cart just recently, their newer unit, which I helped beta test a couple years ago, and was able to make it profitable in less than 6 months. So that's kind of been my small business focus just recently. So I'm going to share a little bit about both of these. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk about what is metabolic testing, in case everyone is not as familiar. Ultimately, I'm talking specifically about 2 different types of metabolic testing: resting metabolic rate testing, which is the more diet and nutrition focus component of metabolic testing. That's where we're looking at how many calories a day your body is utilizing. We're looking at the respiratory exchange ratio to see what substrates that calorie burn is coming from, and then also active metabolic rate testing. And so I've focused a little bit more on the active metabolic rate side, simply because that's the key to endurance sports, essentially. So you'll hear us talk about VO2 max testing, or also VO2 sub-max, basically just any type of active metabolic test where we're monitoring your breath, monitoring your heart rate, and learning about your metabolism. With that, I've also focused a lot on what we call metabolic efficiency, which is just looking at what intensities your body is burning fats, burning carbs, to see where you can build your endurance. And that has applications for things like marathons and Ironman, like long distance, ultra distance triathlons and endurance sports. And then individual sport efficiencies, so running economy, cycling economy, rowing economy. You'll hear all different types of active metabolic rate testing and even blood lactate testing. So with the new metabolic cart, you can actually input blood lactate numbers, which is a really nice feature. So you can have both blood lactate and indirect calorimetry, the science of the active metabolic rate testing in one. So that's one of the reports you see here on the bottom is really that fat burn focus, and that's one of the neat new features of the KORR cart that I've grown to appreciate. So what is a complete metabolic test is something I like to talk about as well. And this is really, if you think about resting metabolic rate testing and active metabolic rate testing, when you combine the two, it gives you a more complete view. I like to call it the 24-hour view of your metabolism. You know, the resting metabolic rate test tells you what you're doing for the 23 hours of the day you're not working out. And then the active metabolic rate test, or the VO2 MAX test, tells you what your body's metabolism is doing for the hour or so per day that you might be actively training. And when you blend those two together, that's what I would call a complete metabolic test profile. And at least with the new Cardio Coach cart, you can actually do both tests and have the data from the active test feed into the resting test and get that more complete view. So that's something I always encourage as you're thinking about how would I use metabolic testing with my business. Think about not just the active or not just the resting, but how can you make the two work together? Because ultimately that is what I've always felt over the years has really opened the door to helping people understand the value behind metabolic testing. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there in case you haven't thought of it from that perspective, but that's a great way to start with things. The other thing that I think is a misconception to some degree too is with VO2 max testing, people focus on the name VO2 max and they think about just the VO2 max score, which is a great fitness benchmark number to know what is that maximum capacity that your body has to utilize oxygen, you know, your maximum breathing capacity essentially. But that's actually not the most useful part of the test. The most useful part of the test is the additional data that you get as you do that type of test. And that really opens the door to even more areas, I think, of application. And so when you're looking at nowadays all the new sports technology things that have developed, especially with the pandemic, it's kind of accelerated a lot of sports tech. There is a huge area now of where you can take a metabolic test and have it applied in a practical way, specifically with heart rate-based training. So getting more precise or getting that new fitness device or new app or new platform dialed in with greater precision is where metabolic testing really comes in. And that's always been, at least for the last probably I'd say 5 years for our business, been the main area of focus and growth. There's also the big play now on what we call metabolic efficiency, which is the fat versus carb metabolism. And so that is really a growing area of interest, especially in the higher performance space, but also in the weight loss space as well. And so there's a lot of new things that are coming in that space as well. The most important thing I would say, though, is when you think about using metabolic testing within a business or with a client, it's not just about the report and the data, but it's also about how you use that information. And so the biggest part of doing testing as a service should be focused around the consultation that you want to bundle with that service and how you can guide people on how to use that information in a practical way. So I focus a lot of my time and energy around thinking about, okay, now I've got this great data, great accuracy, where can I use this? And you can use it in workout prescription, you can use it in dialing in and customizing someone's training plan, and you can also use it to dial in and customize technology devices. And so those are 3 different areas that really kind of open the door quite a bit with how you can use your metabolic testing. So I've used a lot with, if you're familiar with the Training Peaks platform, it's a popular training plan tool. We end up taking metabolic test results and importing the results to dial in heart rate zones in that platform right away. And that's where we've had a lot of our endurance sports athletes really value what we've been doing. But there's a whole bunch of different audiences. So there are different demographics, there are different age groups, there are different disciplines. And I encourage you, if you're thinking about reviving your business, to think about where those opportunities might be, because for everyone, it might be a little bit different. You know, the general target audience for metabolic testing has historically always been the weight loss clients. It's grown a lot in the past years now, though, with different boutique fitness studios like CrossFit, sports and training centers where people are using technology or using heart rate. There's always the New Year's resolution crowd, which we get a lot of this time of year, obviously, and dialing in fitness programming. So bundling testing with fitness programming is always a big area. And then there's the individual sports. Even within individual sports like running, endurance running, marathon running, you have a beginner demographic, and then you have an experienced or longer distance demographic. In triathlon, same thing. You've got those beginner triathletes, but the bigger market is probably on the long distance, Ironman distance type of triathlons. So that within each group, there can be a lot of different areas. And cycling has a whole plethora of different ways that you can go in terms of demographics, whether it's recreational, whether it's more competitive cyclists that are looking into racing, where there's different areas that are growing now more because of how cycling has had a big boom. There's a huge growth in gravel or off-road cycling, endurance cycling. There's also now this, fitness technology side that's been growing. Everyone's got their Whoop straps and Oura rings and different fitness trackers. I've got a bunch on me that I've been testing. There's a lot of people who are just looking for guidance on how do I use this information? How do I dial this into myself? Fitness professionals too, coaches, trainers, even for youth programming too. We're seeing that as a huge area that's growing. And then also product and service businesses. So designing new products and new services, you can bundle that with metabolic testing to show how tangible the improvements can be in different regards. Then also wellness programs, getting people back into the office. There's a whole area that I'm looking into now as more people are finally getting back into the office after being remote for so long. Also in the medical space with COVID, but also with other things. There's a lot going on both in terms of research and just medical health applications. Heart and lung health has a huge new focus right now just because of COVID. So cardiac rehab has always been a big area, but now essentially COVID or long hauler rehab, the recovery from that, and then at-home fitness. So these are just 14 of the big ones that I've seen and kind of focus on myself. But there can be a lot of other areas. So always think about that as you're thinking about how you can use testing to revive your business. Now, the first big example I'll talk about, some of the success stories I've had with a big health club, so kind of like the Lifetime Fitnesses of the world. In Chicago, we have fitness formula clubs where we really got a lot of recognition for what we did with metabolic testing and heart rate-based training, and that focused on our triathlon side of things, but then grew into the entire health club itself. So there were 5 main areas that I found were key areas of success for us as a large business there. One was tying the metabolic testing to our what we call nutrition solutions programs, basically getting registered dietitians to prescribe and provide nutrition consultations to clients. That is a no-brainer. With resting metabolic rate testing, you can get clients to get better results faster by doing testing. And that was one of the big components that really helped us explode in that space in a very short period of time. Product testing, working with larger businesses. If you have a large health club and you have a larger capacity for doing more metabolic testing, you can also partner. We've had groups over the years who've come to us to test out fitness equipment. Kilogear was one of them, where they're testing if their new workout gear could actually boost your VO2 during workouts, and you could burn more calories or burn more fat by wearing their equipment. And we actually tested that using VO2 MAX testing. There's also research studies that get done, and we've done a few over the years with medical devices for cardiac rehab and whatnot. But the biggest one is actually what we call our heart rate gamification of fitness. And that specifically was probably one of our biggest success stories in this large health club setting, where as we were rolling out this heart rate based technology in group fitness studios, more and more people were getting heart rate monitors, but more and more people were kind of confused about it. They didn't know if it was precise or dialed into them. And by bundling that with our metabolic testing, we were actually able to tailor every single athlete, every single person who at least wanted it, to get their heart rate zones dialed into their metabolism. And that made it easier for us to do games and competitions to motivate people. And ultimately, we were able to bundle testing in with buying a new heart rate monitor or starting a new fitness program. And that is probably one of the biggest areas of growth, I would say, in the fitness space in the last, especially 5 years, I would say, where you're able to reward performance and people are able to believe that their heart rate numbers make sense to them. It's not just that 220 minus your age formula anymore. So that was a really, really big space for us. The other area that was really big was tying it into our membership program. So when we have new members joining our kind of more performance-oriented programs, we've encouraged them to do metabolic testing to really get them dialed in so they can see better results, they can understand the numbers, they can learn as athletes or as fitness enthusiasts. And that was something that would really help them get started quicker, but then we also used it for retention. Most of the athletes I've coached over the years, in especially the endurance sports space, I had them test every single year as much as we could. And that way, as they get a year older, they would be motivated to see, can I beat my numbers from when I was a year younger? And it's amazing how much that can motivate people to stay on a routine. So that was a really big success factor for us, in addition to just being able to dial in their training plans, their workouts with just greater precision. And that's where I think the active metabolic rate testing can really play a key factor in reviving a business if you're looking for that extra boost to what you might be focusing on. We also did a lot of creative things. So we did a lot of creative marketing. One of our favorite ones is one of our athletes here, Brett. We got a picture of him just doing a test one day, and we weren't really planning it necessarily. It just kind of happened. And within a couple months, the marketing team loved the photo so much, they ended up putting it on the back of a ad campaign in Chicago on the downtown buses. So for the next 6 months, I think he had his face on the back of a bus, the metabolic mask, the VO2, the Hans Rudolph mask on there. And it was a great marketing campaign. People saw that and asked questions about it. And that was always very, very fun to see. And we've always been big on that, like embracing the fun aspect of testing. It's not a test. It's a little bit more of an experience and something fun where you're learning about your metabolism, not just benchmarking your fitness. So we would embrace, people wanting to take selfies when they put the masks on, use the hashtags on social media. I don't know, I forget if KORR has any specific additional ones these days, but, VO2 MAX, metabolic training, cardio coach, those hashtags. It's amazing sometimes what doing one test can do to encourage others to want to do it as well. And that social engine is a great way of reviving your business. We also did what I called road shows. So we actually took our equipment because it's relatively portable. It's pretty easy. We got the portable travel cases and whatnot, where we could take it to different locations. So even some of our training centers and facilities that didn't have metabolic testing, we were able to actually bring the testing a couple times a year and make it part of an annual habit that members of our facilities would want to do. It's like, hey, the road show is coming again. Come get tested. And that is a great way, especially, whether you're a large business or a small business, there might be opportunities to partner with different locations or different facilities or different partners, different clubs, different organizations, different corporate entities, and do this type of experience, like a focused week, if you will. And that was huge for us. That really got our services out there for people in terms of awareness, but also got people in the habit of wanting to do it as an annual thing. So those were some of our big success stories, focusing on that large company, that large health club facility, essentially. And then more recently, after a big break because of COVID, most of us weren't testing for a while. Most health clubs were shut down, and it was hard to actually start doing testing again. But then a couple months ago, as I was looking to get back into in-person testing, I started thinking of it from the small business perspective of how can I actually get a test, make it profitable, and use it to aid in my business. So there were 5 kind of areas that I focused on with this. The first big one, I was kind of lucky. One of our prior research partners was looking to do another research study. So they actually had a medical device they were looking to test and link up with VO2 MAX data. And so I was able to partner with them. I mean, ultimately, that's going to get you kick-started if you can find a way to partner with a business, partner with a company, corporate wellness program, research study, whatever it might be. Sometimes dreaming big can get you that first step that you need. I've also focused a lot on virtual and at-home trainings. That was a big area of focus. So with that was actually one of my success stories, was trying to think about how can I use metabolic testing with how the industry is changing. Now that there's more at-home training platforms and the growth of Peloton and Zwift and all these platforms where you've seen 300, 400% growth in a very short period of time, all these platforms generally leverage heart rate training. But most people who start using that aren't necessarily dialed into the technology. They might use the standard formulas, but then they don't buy into it as well, or they don't use the numbers as well. And so thinking about how a metabolic test can be then applied to all these different applications that are out there, technology gadgets that are out there, at-home fitness programs that are out there, is an area that's just exploded in the last couple of years. And it's mostly been because of the pandemic. I actually started a virtual cycling group just as a social thing to connect people. And that's kind of built into, several hundred people just meeting up and enjoying training together. And pretty much everyone uses a heart rate monitor. So a lot of those folks are learning to use heart rate technology. And as they learn more, they get interested in doing testing. So that was kind of a big area of growth. Actually, the one athlete I helped coach to the age group world championships, they now have an elite level of virtual cycling, world championships in virtual cycling that she's competing in next month. She did last year as well. And that is actually a space where they're using testing as well. When people are competing virtually, they don't know, are they cheating somehow? Are these numbers accurate? And the companies like Zwift are actually encouraging their top athletes to go get tested at labs to verify their numbers. So we're seeing an interest both from the top competitive level of athlete, but that's having a trickle-down effect now as well. So to verify numbers and to verify accuracy in the new sports tech areas is definitely a growing space. The other big one, and this is at the health club, we had the MyZone heart rate system, but there's a whole bunch of other platforms like this. Whether you're looking at these group fitness studio platforms where in the studio you can see your heart rate up on a screen. Oftentimes everyone looks like they have different numbers, but when you actually test people and dial them in, then you can get the whole class doing the same perceived exertion level, and all the numbers and the colors look the same. And when people start seeing that really kind of breeds this camaraderie, whether it's in person or virtual. So that's a big area I would encourage you to look at, is all these devices that are out there can be customized using a metabolic test result. And that's an area that I've found is continuing to grow quite a bit. And then it's also through Garmin watches. If you're in endurance sports, you've probably heard of the Garmin fitness watches. It's been interesting to see, and I know KORR now is working on a Connect IQ app for Garmin watches, but there's also a whole bunch that are already out there that will allow you to take a metabolic test result, put it into the watch, and now when someone's working out, their calorie burn information is not only accurate, but it's also telling folks if they're burning the right amount of carbs and fats based on their effort levels. So if you really look at the application space, this is continuing to grow and grow and grow. And it's just a matter of time as you'll see more and more technology devices being able to be customized. Whoop straps and whatnot are starting to open the doors to allowing your personalized profile, if you will, be applied to them. So it's interesting to see the doors that are opening up because of this as well. And then ultimately, from a coaching perspective, the big area that I work on a lot is then taking that information and applying it to workouts and training plans. So we use the Training Peaks platform. I even created a whole club around just learning how to train smarter, leveraging a tool called Training Peaks. And so with that, I give people discounts on testing. They get tested, they can customize their training plans and get that higher level of precision with everything that they're doing. So this is another, for the higher level athlete, the Ironman triathletes, the marathoners, this is where you can allow, I call it, where the average Joe can train like a pro. You can learn how to take the same tools and techniques that professional athletes use for entry-level athletes as well. Beginners, first-timers, enthusiasts. So that is a huge space as well. The other thing I started doing as a small business is working with other small businesses. So actually partnering with bike shops. I have one of my coaches actually ended up buying a bike shop called BFF Bikes here in Chicago. So we're partnering with them, and as they're doing their winter training programs, we've added on metabolic testing as a add-on service that people can do. So we're actually going to do a road show at their bike shop where people can get tested at their bike shop. So if they live nearby, it's much more convenient for them, if they don't want to travel due to COVID or whatnot, knowing that we can bring metabolic testing to them, whether it's at a local business or even at home. So I've been doing some testing where I bring equipment to people's homes and actually do at-home testing as well. It costs more, obviously, but as a business, that gives me an opportunity to figure out the economics of it and adjust the pricing accordingly. So that's something to really think about as well. With inflation and with the added expense of sanitization and other layers of protection, you want to think about, okay, this doesn't necessarily make it more complicated. Yeah, there's maybe a couple extra steps and different things that you're going to do, but it's also an opportunity to evaluate, are your prices correct? Should you be charging more? And the answer is probably yes. And so that gives you an opportunity to look at how you can generate more revenue by thinking about those added levels of protection that you're adding more value. If people feel more confident that they can test and not be worried, that really creates more value as well. And now that everyone's wearing a mask, people are familiar with putting on a VO2 mask. It used to always be an experience trying to get people used to breathing with a mask on their face when they do their first VO2 test. Now everyone's familiar with wearing masks. So it's a theme that you can play on in a lot of ways. But the added layers of protection that I've been focusing on too is something to think about as you're getting into testing. I've started using more filters, more hoses. The KORR system is nice because you can get all the separate components, and after a test is done, take one off, disinfect it, replace it with another one. So you can do back-to-back testing. You can do more tests in a day, as long as you're getting that right level of disinfection. I've started doing ultraviolet disinfection as well, sanitization. So there's different things that you can do to make yourself feel comfortable as a test administrator, but also to make the client feel comfortable. And while initially I was worried people would be a little nervous about testing, it's pretty much been exactly like it's been before the pandemic. So it's nice to see that has really not impacted things. And as a result, I've had to obviously increase my pricing because of additional maybe time, more sanitization, things like that. But it's also given us an opportunity to bring more revenue in as well. So think about that side of it, and then also think about the new motivations that people are having. Because of COVID, a lot of people who've had long hauler syndromes want to know, like, hey, has this affected me, or do I still have my VO2 max fitness? So, thinking about how you can improve your VO2 max score affects your cardiovascular health is a great way to, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, make you more COVID bulletproof, if you will. The highest, the greatest factor, the greatest comorbidity, right, is overweight. If you can improve your VO2 max score through weight loss, you're essentially boosting not just your fitness score, but you're also making yourself potentially more resistant to, the severe impacts, at least, of COVID. You're never going to make yourself 100% bulletproof, but you can definitely improve your health and well-being. And that is definitely a great takeaway and a great area of focus that has actually brought some new people back into wanting to get tested. So anyhow, think about those opportunities. That is kind of the biggest thing that I kind of took a step back on, to just think about, okay, where am I going to focus my energy? Where can I bring the most value to my clients and my athletes? What are they looking for? So kind of the big themes here. One, the idea of doing it like an annual checkup. Metabolic testing is something that is not necessarily just a one and done test. It's something you'll want to do again over time to stay motivated, to see if your numbers change. And with that, it's a great way to just simply train smarter and maintain that motivation and maintain clients. The retention aspect of doing testing is really big. We used to bake it in where if people stayed on our membership programs for a certain period of time, they would get an additional metabolic test. So you can have athletes earn it through gamification. You can have it be earned through retention and use it as a retention tool in addition to a revenue generator. So training smarter, whether it's with different technology and apps that are out there, Pelotons, Zwift, Garmin watches, all the different devices that are out there, that's huge. Bundling it with services and technology, whether someone's buying a new heart rate monitor, maybe they want to get a test as they're buying that new piece of sports tech, or maybe they're signing up for a training program. That is a great time to benchmark your fitness, and then at the end of the program, see how much you improve. So that can be a big component. The gamification we talked about, the at-home testing might open your door to reach new clients that you hadn't before. So it's something I'd strongly encourage you to think about. It will take a little bit more time and energy to get that started, but it might be worthwhile based on where your focus is. And then ultimately, if you don't feel like you have the expertise, is also the idea of partnering. So I partner a lot. I train other staff how to do testing, but I also partner with other coaches, other training centers. I get referrals, I give referrals. And that is sometimes a really effective way of growing your business. Is not just thinking about, I have to invest a lot more energy. Maybe I don't have the time to get an expertise in metabolic testing, but you can go on the KORR website and find all the different training centers around the country and find groups that you might be able to partner with. And that can be a win-win for multiple businesses. So think about that in terms of partnering with coaches, with personal trainers, small businesses, corporate wellness programs, companies. It can be special events. It can be all these different areas, and leverage now that there's a lot more of a fitness ambassador or social media ambassador world now that seems to be growing. Maybe partnering with some very effective celebrities or YouTube personalities or whatnot, people that can help you get the word out, is also a very, very effective tool. So think about those main opportunities. But the main takeaway, that the theme that I always come back to with metabolic testing is the fact that it can be a great motivator. So it can always give you more precision. Absolutely, that's the main purpose maybe behind doing testing. But then what people realize is it can actually motivate you to a whole new level as well. And that can be a motivator for both your business, but also for your clients. And so that's something to think about. And if you want to really get in this space, I encourage you to think about focusing on the education, both educating yourself to learn more, but also educate your clients. As they learn more and they learn how to use the numbers, they'll want to potentially get tested again, right? So it's not just a one-time experience for them. They're going to see the value in testing and wants to come back and test again, especially as you get older, to know that your numbers are ideally improving. So the expertise matters, the experience matters. Focus your energy on that. That's an area that I like to spend a lot of my personal passion is around educating. And so if any of you have questions or wants to learn more about how I use metabolic testing from a fitness and kind of fun and motivation perspective, think about always innovating. Think about inspiring yourself, think about inspiring others. And the program that I'm beginning to develop now too it's not fully available yet, but I'm actually looking at starting to develop a network for my coaches where I train different types of endurance coaches, but also fitness professionals, where there's personal trainers. And I developed a whole training curriculum back at the Large Health Club that I'm now utilizing in another capacity, where I'm even going to launch an online course based on how to learn not just how to do a good test, but then take that information and make it actionable. So I'm always happy to do referrals, partnerships, you name it. I do workshops, in-person stuff, virtual stuff. So if you guys have any questions, please feel welcome. You can reach out to me, Coach Chris. You can reach me at either coach@4starendurance.com, coach@metabolicathlete.com. Happy to share my good and bad learning experiences with metabolic testing and how I've learned to use, especially the KORR metabolic cart, to help my business. And if you're in the Chicago area, I'm currently doing a research study, so you can actually get a free VO2 MAX test with me if you're in the Chicago area. I think we have a few more spots left, but you can just go to my website, 4starendurance.com, and go to /VO2 MAX, and then that'll take you to our current research study that we're doing. And pretty soon here, probably next month, I'll have a new website up here, Metabolic Athlete, where I'll be having the training curriculum and kind of the education portal, if you will, on metabolic testing and specifically its application in endurance sports. So that's pretty much all I had. I know I can talk for quite some time, but if you guys have any questions, I think I'll turn it over at this point back to KORR, and we'll see if we can have some time. We can answer some questions for folks and take it from there.
Thanks, Chris. So, like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat. The chat is up in the speech bubble in the top right. Looks like we already have a question here for you, Chris. This is from Christos. How do you approach past metabolic testing patients to redo a test?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the most important things, especially as you start doing more testing, is obviously building your client database and having a group that you regularly engage. You might have some clients that you engage via, weekly, monthly newsletters, and you can always kind of plug in metabolic testing. I like to do it as an annual thing. Like beginning of the year, I find a lot of endurance athletes are motivated, obviously with the New Year's resolution, but also because they're starting new training programs. So I try to develop that as a habit of like, hey, you're starting a new program, make sure you're getting your numbers dialed in. And so that's a big component of it, is having it not be just the fact that you're promoting metabolic testing, but that it's part of a larger program. So sometimes doing special offers with that is great. If it's the new year, maybe you have a new year promotion going on. But that's the best way to kind of get people re-engaged, is to really let them think of like, hey, what was that number that I got a couple of years ago? One of the neat features, at least for some of you who might have a KORR Metabolic Card, know the Cardio Coach phone app. So when you do a test, you can upload it, and the clients can download it onto their phone, and they can use their metabolic test data with a Bluetooth heart rate monitor. And that actually records their whole test history. So you can see from year to year to year where your numbers are. And one of the things that I found that's been very helpful for me, I always like to give people something that's actionable that they can use right away. And so what I used to do, and I don't have a great example with me, but I have a water bottle, and I actually made customized water bottles, with our company names on them and whatnot. And on the back of the bottle were heart rate zone charts, and I would put their numbers. So as soon as they finished a test, I would have a water bottle, and it would have empty spaces, and we would take a Sharpie and write their numbers in there. And what I would tell the clients is, when that Sharpie wears down on the water bottle, it might be time to get retested again. And I found that was a pretty fun way to get people, one, a actionable takeaway. They could use it literally right then and there for their next workout, or the next day when they go to train, they'll remember their numbers in front of themselves. But then also they're motivated, because if the Sharpie wears down, the ink wears down, it might be time to retest. It's been a while since you've retested. So I found that those are a couple different ways, at least, that I found that has been a good way to get clients to think about coming back in to redo a test. So I hope that answers that question.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Looks like we have another question from Scott. He asks, do you have to be trained or certified to provide these services? And what does the normal profile of a tester look like? So it looks like two-part question here. So do you need to be trained and certified? Part two, what does a normal profile of a tester kind of look like?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a normal profile. You get a lot of different, in the large health club setting, we had people who were personal trainers that focused on boxing. We had personal trainers that were focused on endurance sports. And everyone had their own specialty. And I encourage you to think about that too, because it's sometimes easier to develop in one area of specialty rather than try to do too much. Like I know my area of specialty in endurance sports, so I really focus on those sports. But when it comes to maybe something like boxing, I might not have that expertise, and I might refer to somebody else. But in terms of like the training and actually learning how to do these tests, KORR has a lot of material and documentation in terms of how to administer tests, but there aren't really, I would say, any specific industry standards certifications on how to administer a good test. A lot of it does come with learning. You get a lot of exercise physiologists, so people who have got background in doing testing in an academic space, who then get into more of a fitness space. So we do see a lot of exercise physiologists, and that's a great place to look in terms of getting talent if you're trying to get some folks to do testing. But there are some certifications and some focuses, so some specialty courses. I went through the Metabolic Efficiency Training Specialist, the MATS program from Bob Siebelhar. That focused a lot on the fat and carb, kind of Ironman endurance athlete demographic. So that can be good from the education standpoint. But really, a big part of the expertise is actually just doing tests. So if you're in a fitness setting, if you're able to work, and I use a lot of my coaches as guinea pigs, and that's actually a way that I've learned a lot, is just working with different clients, different ages, ethnicities, backgrounds, and that is really what helps you become a better metabolic tester. The magic number I used to challenge anyone I trained. So in-house at our health club, we developed our own metabolic training program. I know Lifetime health clubs, they have their own metabolic specialist kind of training curriculum as well. So a lot of the big health clubs you'll see, they might have a metabolic specialist concentration that they build either in-house or partner with somebody on. That's something that I'm actually looking at helping other companies do, is I come in and provide that education for them. So I'm trying to fill that gap, because there definitely is a gap in the industry there. But I don't know if that kind of completely answers your question, but that's what I encourage you to look at, is either exercise physiologist backgrounds, any type of courses that you can find specific to metabolism, and that's where you'll start to develop your expertise.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to add one more note to that. Just from KORR's side, if you purchase your equipment through KORR, you will have access to a free training session with our exercise physiologist, and she'll be able to train your staff according to where your expertise is at. Also, make sure you have a good conversation with your salesperson. They will be able to direct you toward the product that will match the level of expertise within your facility. We've got time for one more question here that I can actually probably take. Angelo asked what the cost for KORR metabolic testing equipment is for the machine and the hoses, etc., and if there's a monthly fee for the Cardio Coach software. And I will tell you right off the bat, no, there is no monthly fee for the software. The prices for the units start at just $39.95 for RMR testing. So if you're not doing the exercise testing, if you're just doing resting testing to show your client's metabolic rate and focus kind of on that nutrition side, you can go as low as $39.95, and then it goes from up from there. If you have the real expertise within your facility, it could come up to about to over $10,000, but you can pay for just only what you need. And the KORR masks come in various models. Sorry, I misspoke there. KORR does make these various models in with different features in each model, so you never have to pay for more than what you need. So that'll be part of your conversation with your salesperson. Chris, do you have anything to comment on kind of getting the return on your investment after making that initial investment in the metabolic equipment?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it too is, looking at the total cost. Obviously, one of the things that I started doing because of COVID, just to add an additional level of protection, is we used to always use the reusable masks, which are more expensive, but they're reusable, which is nice. But we also started now using what we call the take-home masks, so everyone gets their own mask. You're never using a mask that somebody else has you use, and we simply bake that cost into the cost of the testing. And I think especially nowadays, people are willing to pay a little bit more for more protection and whatnot. And so that's a great thing to think about is, I've seen the average price of a metabolic test go up, and it hasn't necessarily changed the demand or the number of people that want to come and do testing. You used to be able to do a test for $100, $150 per test. Now the industry standard, I would say, depending on your market, might be $200 to $300 a test, if not more. And so that gives you the opportunity to make more revenue per test to offset the costs of the equipment. So that's something to think about. But also bundling it. That's really the key way to make money. Is as a business, if you just are doing testing to do testing, you're going to really limit your opportunities. I look at testing as an add-on to my core business, which is coaching. I might have a client that wants to do private coaching, and that'll add up to potentially a couple $1,000s a year. versus just a little bit for a test once a year. So the more you think about it from that perspective is a great way to generate more revenue with it as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. That's about all the time that we have for now. If you have more questions for Chris specifically, his information is here. You can go ahead and take a screenshot or write that down. And if you have any questions specific for KORR, then we're here to help. If you go to the next slide, you can email salesinfo@korr.com. I'm also going to drop in the chat a link for scheduling a virtual demo with one of our KORR specialists. If you have questions about how metabolic testing would fit into your practice specifically, or you have specific questions about the equipment or the testing that a KORR specialist could help out with, go ahead and click that link and you can schedule that. Demo, that video chat. Also, as a thank you for joining us today, we want to offer you, if you are looking to purchase metabolic test equipment, we want to offer you $500 off your purchase if you are planning on purchasing before the end of February. So when you go to buy, be sure to tell your salesperson that you saw the webinar and give them the coupon code Navin 2022, and that will get you your $500 off your equipment. Thank you again for coming, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.